Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog. This week I'm going to be reading a couple of Brandon Sanderson related things. Firstly, I am going to be reading The Well of Ascension. This is part of my Cosmere reread, so I am rereading all the Cosmere books. Eventually I will be reading books for the first time, but at the moment I'm rereading the Mistborn trilogy. This is the second book, The Well of Ascension. Mistborn is probably my favourite trilogy, or my favourite series within the Cosmere. So if you don't know, Brandon Sanderson's novels, or at least most of them, are set within one extended universe where there are different planets and I guess like different manifestations of the way that the magic works in each of these worlds. Mistborn, most of the magic is metal based. Primarily we have allomancers who can swallow different metals and get different powers from them. Most people can only use one particular metal's power, but we have the Mistborn who can use all the powers. In the first book we have this Lord Ruler who's been dictator over the world for a long time. The general concept is like what would happen if the bad guy won. But in the first book we had this group of people kind of coming together, doing a bit of a heist and trying to overthrow the Lord Ruler. I don't really know what I can say about what the second book is about without spoiling that first book. But I do remember from my first read that it just keeps like building on things and taking them even further. I also think it's where we're going to get this guy. So this was in the Brandon Sanderson Secret Project, like Kickstarter swag boxes. This guy, I really love him. And he was in the Mistborn themed box recently. But I was reading Mistborn at the time when I opened that box and I hadn't got to this guy yet, but I'm pretty sure he's in the second book. I'm pretty sure. And I love him. I actually love him mostly this way, but I told my boyfriend the idea about like having it this way to mean like you can talk to me, and this way to mean fuck off, don't talk to me. And now whenever I put it this way, he won't talk to me. So I mostly have to keep it the other way now. Anyway, as well as reading Well of Ascension, which I'm really excited about, I'm also going to be reading a book that I'm less excited about, and that is Towers of Midnight. So I guess it says by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. I believe that Brandon Sanderson wrote most of this. Maybe Robert Jordan had written a few little bits and left a bunch of notes. But if you don't know, Brandon Sanderson finished off the Wheel of Time series after Robert Jordan died. So I have honestly not really enjoyed my read through of the Wheel of Time. In fact, I gave up at book 8 and skipped to book 11? Book 12. I skipped to book 12, and I know like it seems kind of stupid to be like, I really want to read this book series and then just skip like a quarter of the books. The thing is, there are two main reasons why I wanted to read The Wheel of Time. One, just because it's such a popular series. I have heaps of like friends who really love this series, and I wanted to be able to talk about the series and know about the series. And the other part was that I really like Brandon Sanderson, so I wanted to read these last books that were written by Brandon Sanderson. So when I was having a really bad time in like the 4th to 8th book, if it hadn't been for the Brandon Sanderson part, I would have just given up completely, and I would have read some plot summaries online and said that's enough, I can now have those conversations with my friends. But like, I would like to be able to talk with more confidence about how the series ends, and I would like to know whether Brandon Sanderson manages to improve the series. So yes, I skipped a bit in the middle. It's probably not the best way of reading The Wheel of Time, but like I just really could not make it through the slog. That's what people call like the middle section of The Wheel of Time, and I think it's a much bigger section than a lot of people say, and I don't like it. I feel like The Wheel of Time has so much potential because we have this world where there's like kind of circular time and the same events happen over and over again. There's all these prophecies kind of based around it. There's almost like some multiverse stuff, but it's never quite been like developed to its potential. There's a whole bunch of dream-based stuff, especially like the way that works with the wolves is a really interesting magic system, but again, not like it's just not developed enough for me to be happy with it. But Brandon Sanderson is great at a bunch of the stuff that I've just criticized this series for not like tapping into its potential for. So I'm really hoping that the Brandon Sanderson books will be better. And admittedly, for book 12, I started out struggling with it, but by the end, I kind of liked it. So I'm really hopeful that this will have me back loving The Wheel of Time. Because I did like the first book, and the second book wasn't too bad either. And then it went downhill. But we're hoping that up at the end, it's going to improve as well. Fingers crossed, because otherwise, I don't know. But I am actually probably going to listen to this mostly on audiobook. I might do the thing where I read the audiobook and read the physical book at the same time, but maybe not all the time, because I need a book to read when I'm out running and stuff, which I'm hoping to do more of this week, if the weather will behave, because I was sick last week, and it's really annoying me that I have to get my fitness back again now. Anyway, hopefully I will end up loving both of these, but I'll check back in when we have made a start on things. Hello, so reading update time. I have managed to make some progress on both the books I've been reading. Firstly, Towers of Dawn. Towers of Midnight? What's Towers of Dawn? Oh, Sarah J. Maas. That's a weird connection by my brain because that's nothing like this. Although I did really dislike Tower of Dawn, so maybe there's a connection there. Although, like, this is fine so far. So I'm about 25% of the way through. What I do find interesting is I was looking at a bunch of 1 and 2 star reviews, and it seems like a lot of people are mad that Brandon Sanderson has increased the pace as much as he has. Even though, like, I agree, the original books or like the earlier books very slow. This book is still very slow, really. Like faster than those, but still very slow. So really this has just been setting things up a bit. I get the feeling that the main kind of thing going to be going on in this book is about Perrin kind of growing up and learning to accept his leadership position and his connection with the wolves, so like his magical ability. And then a little bit of that with Matt and Nynaeve as well. Because I guess in the last book we had Rand and Egwene really finding their place, and that's still kind of continuing in this as well, because it needs to continue, I guess, to the next book. So like all these characters kind of coming to their final position for this final battle is what I think these books are trying to achieve at the moment. And like the story with Matt, it's kind of okay, except like I don't really like his relationship with his wife, and like just the whole thing about him being like, no, I'm a blacksmith, I don't want to be a leader. It's a little bit predictable in terms of where it's going, or where I assume it's going. It could surprise me, you never know. Probably not. There is also a character who's kind of found themselves in a leadership position within the Children of the Light. So the Children of the Light are kind of like this religious group that think that they're all about being against the Dark Lord, but quite often the people in their leadership positions have been Dark Friends, even though the Children of the Light are very against Dark Friends. And also the Children of the Light have a habit of like accusing everybody under the sun of being a Dark Friend, and just because of that they're very ineffective. So I think they're kind of going to have a bit of a battle, conflict with Perrin's group, and then through that I hope the Children of the Light will kind of become more firmly on the side of good. So that's what I'm expecting of this. As I said, it's very slow, but I'm not minding it. There's still definitely like bits about the relationships, like the way men and women interact, that I'm not enjoying. And I feel like so many of the characters have like such similar problems that it gets a bit tedious, but I'm not minding it, so I will continue that. The other thing that I'm reading is The Well of Ascension. So I'm actually only about 100 pages in, which I was hoping to finish this week, but this is a 750 page book. Like, my copy looks really little, but it's actually very thin pages and a lot of words on a page. So I haven't made it very far through. I think that's probably more life than the book, although I will admit that it is sort of a slow start, which is interesting because it kind of just picks up again from the conflict that ended in the last book. And so there is a lot of stuff going on, but the way it's been written is in a very non-urgent way. And I have read this before, but I can't really remember, but I feel like it's just going to like suddenly explode. But right now it's just putting all the pieces in place. It's also very political, which the last book had a decent amount of, but this one has even more kind of discussions around like what a good government might look like. And I guess like how organizational decisions could be made. I'm finding those bits quite frustrating because I've been very glad to leave organizational decisions behind since I finished working, and I'm not sure I want to read about them, to be honest. But yeah, there are lots of pieces in place. We have had this friend in the book, and I do love him already, so that's great. But yeah, not too much has happened yet. I need to make more progress with it. Oh, one thing I did notice though is Brandon Sanderson makes use of the word diaphanous, which is a word that I had never heard of, as far as I know, until I picked up the Wheel of Time. Robert Jordan uses the word diaphanous to describe things like every 5 seconds. Noticeably, haven't seen it in this book, which was mostly written by Brandon Sanderson, I believe. But in this one, we use the word diaphanous. I don't think anyone should ever be using the word diaphanous because I don't think most people know what it means or would ever use it. So I don't think it's a very helpful descriptive word. But it was in here.
Pick it up from the top, hit restart. So far it's been so hard to live, but lately something in me changed. Let it go, let it be. Don't fight your way back in.
Hello, so I have not made much more progress on this. I think I'm about 33% of the way through after my run yesterday. And like, things are just kind of like meandering along. I think last time I talked about like a lot of 1 and 2 stars saying like that the pacing was so much faster now and they didn't like that. But honestly, it's still so slow paced. And like, it's not necessarily bad. Like, I think maybe this pacing is good for the book. I do know there are lots of people who love the really like glacial pacing of Robert Jordan, but this, I think it's okay for the way the book is trying to approach things. I am really liking Perrin and his experiences in the wolf dream. I think that's probably one of my favorite parts of the Wheel of Time. So I'm really liking the way that finally, like 13 books into the series, he's finally properly learning how to use his magical abilities. There is also something interesting happening with the Aes Sedai and the White Tower, where they're trying to find some kind of betrayer in their midst. And I think that part of the story is interesting as well. I do note that something I've been thinking about lately when I've been reading it is how similar a lot of the women are in terms of their temperament. Like that most of the time they seem really sensible and intelligent, but also like they can snap and just be really angry with almost no reasoning. And like even the Aes Sedai, who are supposedly very in control of their emotions, like will just constantly be having little like emotional explosions. But it's like all the women, very similar temperaments. And I do wonder from a few comments I've heard Brandon Sanderson make if that is just what Robert Jordan's wife is like. Anyway, I wish there was a bit more variety in the different characters, because actually I'd say all the women are very similar, but all the men are very similar too. And the only one that's maybe particularly different would be Matt. And even though I really like Matt, I do find the chapters with him, like it's really digging into the idea that he swears a lot and it uses the word bloody like all the time. There was one sentence where it used the word bloody 3 times in a very short sentence, and I was like, this is a bit much. But, you know, at least it makes Matt's perspective a little bit different. Maybe that's part of why I like Matt as much as I do, although I think I like him less now than I did at the beginning of the book. So anyway, I'll continue this probably whenever I go for a run again. The other thing I have been continuing is Well of Ascension, and I'm making more progress on this. I think I'm about 1/3 of the way through, which is actually not really that far. I've still got a lot more to read, and still I feel like not much has happened. The only significant thing that's happened since I last talked to you is something that I find really weird to have been introduced like this far into the second book. So basically it's introduced this whole new race of people, the Kolos, and they are like blue people that don't stop growing, but their skin stay the same size. So like when they're really young, their skin is really baggy, and then when they're really big and old, I think they only live like 20 years or something, when they're big and old, their skin is all really tight and they're really violent. And like that's fine. They're a little bit weird, but I don't mind them. But it's a little bit strange that I don't think they were mentioned at all in the first book. And I've always heard that Brandon Sanderson is a big planner, but I just don't really understand why, when they were initially planning the heist, or like making the plan to overthrow this Lord Ruler at the beginning, like why would they not have mentioned the Koloss? Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. And the only thing I can really think is either it was mentioned in the first book and I just missed it because there's so much, or he didn't actually plan on having the Koloss until he got to the second book, which is a little bit disappointing. But also, like, I'd completely forgotten about them, because this is a reread for me, right? But I'd completely forgotten about them, so I don't really know how important they will be to the plot, but I guess. There have certainly been a lot of things that I've forgotten, but also some things that I remember. So there is another part of the story where it's suggested, or they suspect, that one of the people in the crew has been replaced with an impersonator, and it's quite possible due to the magic that this could have happened. And I know what's going on. And so like Vin's running around trying to figure out who might be the impersonator, but I know what's really going on. And so like it's kind of interesting to see how that's all woven together. I'm quite enjoying that part. Anyway, it is pretty grey and rainy and gross today, so I'll probably read some more of this and catch up with you again.
Baby, I know what you're going through. I'll be waiting up for you all night. Don't think it's too much to ask for. I'm always gonna make sure you're alright.
I'm going to update my vlog post, so I can't really have your tail like this. I don't think you can sit on my lap right now. I'm kind of busy. I think you want to sit on this blanket. Yeah, that'll be way nicer. Hello, so if you can hear purring, it's because my neighbor cat is sitting right next to me, and he's very happy about it. But I wanted to update you on my reading. So firstly, now he's licking himself. I don't know how much you can hear that. Anyway, firstly, I've actually managed to get about 60%. I don't know what my makeup's doing, by the way, because it's half washed off. I managed to get 60% of the way through this because I was listening to it while I went and cleaned my back steps, which were honestly disgusting. So it was good to have a distraction, although this is not the best distraction because I still am not fully engaged in the story. Like, I like it okay. I do feel like I can see all the pieces starting together, and there's quite a lot going on in this, really, which is such a change from the earlier books. I'm just going to keep saying that probably. But I really liked, there was like a trial that one character went through, and that got quite, like, almost like quite dark. So I really enjoyed that, and as well the whole bit with Perrin learning about his wolf abilities. I'm really liking everything we're learning about the wolf dream world. You can probably hear my washing machine as well, I've just realized. Anyway, I'm not loving this, but like I'm having an okay time, and I am interested to see how it's all going to come together. I feel like I can see it starting to come together. I'm enjoying certain pieces of it. That's the best I can say without spoilers, really. The other thing I've been reading is Well of Ascension. I do still think, so I've managed to get about halfway through, but I do still think it's quite slow. And I think that's actually what I felt like on the first read of it as well. Like, things are happening, and again, you can see how everything's coming together, but it's just slow. And I think as well, like, there's a lot of focus on the two probably younger characters, like, emotional journeys and like them feeling very insecure in their youthful relationship. And so I guess that's why some people do say this series is a bit YA. I would say those relationships are a bit YA, whatever that means. I talked about last time when I was reading Godkiller in my last reading vlog, that I think often when people say things feel YA, it's not necessarily about the simplicity of the writing style, it's more about like those coming of age themes, and also the fact that it's often very explicitly telling you how people are feeling rather than like letting you imagine the situation and feel the feelings for yourself. And I feel like this is more on that side of like telling you how people are feeling rather than letting you imagine it. But it's not too much like that. Like, it's not annoying me. Although I can see how some people would say a certain drama is just miscommunication and really wouldn't like that. I don't mind miscommunication. I can see why in this situation they might not communicate with each other, even though it is a little bit frustrating. But I am halfway now, so I'm hoping kind of that the pace will start to pick up. I guess we'll see. It's now Sunday, and so I am coming to accept that I'm not going to finish both of these books by the end of the week, or either of these books by the end of the week, like I was hoping or like I was planning. But that's fine. We'll just keep going until we get them done. Hello. So I put on some makeup to try and look less tired, and I'm not sure it's worked. Also, it's Wednesday and I am still reading these books. So this one though, I'm doing okay. I got up to 85% today when I had my infusion, so I walked to the hospital and back. To be honest, I thought I might finish it, but I'm still a few hours away from the end. I think 5.5 hours, but kind of 2.5 if I listen at 2 times speed, which I have been. Anyway, how am I feeling about it? Probably the same-ish. I am enjoying how a lot of the main characters are finally coming back together, because to be honest, for most of the middle of the series, a lot of the main characters don't even like interact with each other very often. And like just recently some main characters came together and they were talking about events that happened like in the first few books, and I was like, are you guys only just like getting a chance to tell each other about this? It just seems like so weird that things that were set up so early in the series have taken so long to kind of come to the next step of things. But I did really enjoy, there's kind of like a trial that someone goes through to get I'm trying not to spoil things, accepted into this group, and like that was very stressful and I thought quite epic in the way that it went down, as well as kind of a part where Egwene and Perrin's stories come together, and I really liked how that was done, even though it was a little bit obvious, but I kind of liked it. And just like all the characters coming together, I am enjoying that. I know the point of these books really is to set up all the characters in place for this final battle, and they're starting to come together, and I think that's going to be really satisfying, or hopefully. I don't really know where this book is going to end exactly. I know that the last 3 books were really like, originally Robert Jordan was going to do them as one book. There was no way they were going to fit in one book, and so Brandon Sanderson split it. And so I do wonder like how organic or like how satisfying the ending of this book will be, since it's really just setting up for the next one. Although, that said, the 11th book, 12th book, the 12th book had a satisfying ending, so that's a good sign for this. I should finish this tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. Maybe. No promises. The other thing, of course, I've been reading is Well of Ascension. This one, I do feel like still it's very slow. And I was remembering, actually, the first time I read this, I did think it was really slow as well. I just think it's really focused on the politics. And I like a lot of the, like, philosophy in here about leadership and government. But there's just some, like, bits that stick with me that I can't get over. Like, there's one part where they're, like, in the middle of this siege. And there's, like, armies about to attack them, including like these Koloss awful creatures, super dangerous. So like it's an awful situation, and the government has a conversation about an important decision, and just then they say, all right, we'll take a 2-week break and then we'll discuss it again. And I was like, you have armies at your door and you're going to take a 2-week break before making an important decision? Like, maybe you can't wait that long? Just seemed like very unrealistic. Which really is not how I've previously felt about Brandon Sanderson. I've always thought he was really good at writing realistic storylines, but now, maybe not. Maybe not. As well, I have still been quite frustrated with the relationship between the 2 main characters. It's just so frustrating. Like, just talk to each other. So many secrets that Vin, the main character, is keeping that she doesn't need to be keeping. And I kind of know it's like been set up as her whole personality is keeping secrets. But like, this is the guy you love, so maybe you should tell him the basics of some stuff that's going on. So it's a little bit frustrating. And also, I kind of can't remember how this ends. I feel like the plot twists that I remember in my head were actually the third book. So I'm not sure where this one ends, but again, I'm going to try and finish this one off in the next day or two. I'm definitely behind, but it doesn't matter.
Lazy Sunday mornings, hiding under covers. I don't mind staying in with you. Play your favorite movie, laying right beside me.
Hello, so this must be the end of the vlog because I finished both of these books. Which ones should I talk about first? Let's talk about Tower of Midnight. I didn't find the ending of this as satisfying as I did the previous book, The Gathering Storm. Like, that had quite an emotional ending that felt very satisfying and like it was really setting things up for the next part of the story. The ending, I guess, like, all these pieces are now in place for that final battle and that final book, but there wasn't really the emotional ending for that. I guess there's a bit that kind of is trying to be that, but also there were just too many different pieces going on in this and not all of them had that same emotional weight. And I don't think they were connected perhaps as well as the previous book. There's also kind of a weird bit in there about Avienda and the future of the Aiel, and that felt quite disconnected. I think maybe Avienda was a little bit at the beginning, but mostly it felt like that just kind of got brought in at the end. And it was kind of interesting, but it just didn't feel like it connected to everything else that was going on. And I think that's the big struggle with this, because this whole book series is kind of about bringing together all these different groups of people and all these different cultures to help out with this big battle against this Dark Lord. There's just so many pieces to it that it is hard to keep track of them all, and also I imagine really hard to weave all those pieces together. But there were some things that happened in this book that I really liked. So I think, like, for me, conceptually, there are some interesting things in the Wheel of Time. I just still don't feel like they're being taken to their potential. I don't know. I probably like the way Brandon Sanderson's doing it better. I don't know if what's happening was always Robert Jordan's plan. Of course, to a degree it is, because he'd written notes for Brandon Sanderson. But, like, it's really hard sometimes, I guess, to separate the concept from the execution. Robert Jordan theoretically responsible for the concept, but not the execution. Anyway, I'm kind of liking how it's come together. I am really interested now to see how that final book's going to go. So I guess it's done its job in making me excited for the final book. Who knows how I'm going to feel about the final book, though. The other thing I finished was Well of Ascension. This is interesting. So the twist at the end was the twist that I remembered that I thought maybe was the third book, but it's actually kind of at the end of the second book. And now I'm thinking maybe I've forgotten most of what happens in the third book. I remember a few events, but I think I don't have a good memory of, like, the bigger issue. I kind of remember it, but not really. But I am excited for the third book because I know the third book is much more about the magic, whereas this one is more about, like, the politics and this conflict going on in the city. Whereas the first book was a nice mix of the magic and the conflict in the city. So, like, this one just a little bit too heavy on the politics for me, and as I said, I think last time, I didn't always feel like some of the things that were happening made sense entirely. And I can see as well that Brandon Sanderson was kind of really trying to balance setting up for the third book and, like, weaving in the little magical things that are happening with the political story, which is probably quite a hard balance to get. For me, I just do feel like this one is a little bit slow in parts, and I definitely got a little bit frustrated with the main characters' kind of, like, romance and their angst over who they are and what they want to be. Even though I can imagine reading this in the right mindset, those parts could be quite enjoyable. They're not necessarily badly written, but this read, I found them a little bit frustrating. As well, there's a lot of, like, religious philosophy in here, and I would say that a lot of it feels quite almost anti-religious, or at least, like, agnostic. There's bits in there which are maybe more on the pro-religion side, but as someone who's, like, not really into religion, I felt like I could relate to a lot of it, which is really interesting. Definitely the first time I read it, I didn't know anything about Brandon Sanderson, whereas now I know, like, how religious he is or how deep he is into the Mormon faith, and, like, a lot of the stuff that's written in here isn't really something I would expect a very religious person to be writing. And I think it shows that he probably has thought a lot, perhaps questioned a lot of his religion. But anyway, if you like religious philosophy, maybe you'll like some of the ideas in here, or at least find them interesting. What else? Oh, rereading this, I really enjoyed, like, knowing some of the things that were happening and seeing, like, how certain scenes were going down. and knowing kind of like the truth of it versus like what you would see on a first read. And I really enjoyed that. So this is definitely worth a reread if you've read it and liked it and you can't remember all the details, but you remember enough to really enjoy knowing those things. So I really liked it. I am going to be reading the third book, but probably not until August, because July I'm going to be reading Brandon Sanderson's next secret project book, and I'm just reading one Sanderson book a month. Well, and the Wheel of Time. Like, we can't be reading more Brandon Sandersons in a month. That's way too much Sanderson for me. So I'll probably finish this series in August, and I'm looking forward to doing that. Anyway, let me know what you've been reading. Have you been reading anything exciting? Or have you read the Mistborn trilogy or the Wheel of Time series? And do you have any thoughts about those? I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.